Welcome to Mrs. V's Reading Corner, where you can enjoy books for educational, fun, or even bedtime stories. Please take the time to like this video, comment below with how you enjoyed it, book suggestions, and more. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to get all the new books that I post first. Satchel Paige by Lesa Cline-Ransome. As a semi-pro pitcher, Satchel developed his own unique style. He'd pick up a tip here and there, put his Satchel spin on it, and polish it off with a brand new name. Got so Satch began to think of his pitches as his children. The hesitation was his magic slow ball. The trouble ball caused all sorts of havoc. And then there was the B-ball, which, according to Satch, would always be where I wanted to be. There was an odd way about his pitching. He would stand tall and straight as an oak tree on the mound. His foot looked to be about a mile apart, and when he shot into the air, it seemed to block out the sun. Satch's arms seemed to stretch on forever, winding, bending, twisting, and then there was that grin he flashed just as he released the ball. It seemed to say, "Go ahead, just try and get a hit off of that." Strike one! And you never saw it coming. I mean, 1 minute it was there, plain as day in his hand, and then all of a sudden, strike two! It was in the catcher's mitt. The batter would strain his eyes, squint a little. Here it comes. Got it now. Strike three! Just like that, all over. Next batter up. Give it to him, Satch. Show your stuff, fans and teammates would shout. And he did, every time. Folks would pack the stands to see how many Satchel could strike out in one game. He made the crowds laugh with his fast talking and slow walking. A man's got to go slow to go long and far, he'd say, but mostly he made them cheer. Never in his 19 years had he heard a sweeter sound. The more cheers he heard, the more his confidence grew. A kind of confidence that made him call to the outfield with the bases loaded and the last hitter up to bat. "Why don't you have a seat? Won't be needing you on this one." Wherever the crowds went, a good paycheck followed, so he made sure to keep them coming. After just 1 year, he was playing in the Negro major leagues for the Chattanooga Black Lookouts, and the folks were still cheering and shouting, "Give it to him, Satch. Show your stuff." There were two major leagues back in 1924 when Satchel was called up because the white major league ball clubs wouldn't allow blacks to play in their leagues. Blacks had created their own in 1920 and named it the Negro Leagues. The white major leagues players enjoyed trains, hotels, hot meals, and short seasons. Negro League players were often refused meals in restaurants and rooms in hotels. They ate on the road and slept where they could, in train depots or on baseball fields. They played 2, sometimes 3 games a day, nearly every day, in a season as long as the weather would hold. And when the season ended in America, Satch went right out on playing and traveling in other parts of the world. Life in the Negro League suited Satchel. He was a traveling man. One city could never hold him for long. He moved from Alabama, where he played with the Birmingham Black Barons, to Tennessee, where he played with the Nashville Elite Giants, and Pennsylvania, where he played with the Pittsburgh Crawfords. From the first breath of spring to the cool rush of fall, he would ride. Sometimes he joined his teammates on trickery old buses, bumping along back roads studded with potholes so deep players would have to hold on to their seats and stomachs just to keep from spilling into the aisles. But mostly he drove along in cars that would take him wherever he wanted to go. The fans will always be waiting in the next town. Their wait could be a long one. He was never much for keeping anyone's time but his own. Once he reached his mid-30s, the joy of traveling began to wear thin for Satchel. He found himself longing for a more settled life and the comforts of a home. In 1941, he finally found it in the warm smile and tender heart of Lahoma Brown. Satch rested his travel-wearied legs and happily began his second career as husband and father. But even though he had finally found what he thought he'd been searching for, it was only a year before he took to the road again with his first and only true love, baseball. His family will have to wait. Satchel's teammates were in love with the game too, and out of that love grew players better than anyone could ever dream. His teammates included Cool Papa Bell, a hitter who ran bases so fast if you blinked you'd swear he'd never left home plate. Oscar Charleston was an outfielder who could tell just where a ball would land as soon as it hit the bat. And then there was Josh Gibson, who some said could hit a ball so hard and so far it would land somewhere in the middle of next week because of his powerful hitting and home run record. Josh was sometimes called the Black Babe Ruth, but many wondered if the Babe should have been called the White Josh Gibson. Back in 1923, when Gibson and Satch were teammates on the Pittsburgh Crawfords, they were considered a mighty powerful duo. Posters for the Crawfords read, Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige, the greatest battery in baseball. Gibson guaranteed to hit 2 home runs and Paige guaranteed to strike out the first 9 men. Someday we'll meet up and see who's best. They will often joke with each other. In 1942, soon after Satchel's return to the road, they got their chance. It was September 10th, 1942, the second game of the Negro World Series. Satch's team, the Kansas City Monarchs, was in a heated best-of-7 matchup against the Homestead Grays, led by Josh Gibson. Toward the end of the game, Satch decided to raise the stakes. With 2 outs in the inning and 1 man on base, he walked 2 players so the bases would be loaded when Josh Gibson came up to bat. Someday we'll meet up and see who's best, rang in Satch's ears as he prepared to face the man who would now determine the fate of his team and Satch's reputation. Satchel called to Josh, remember back when we were playing with the Crawfords and you said you was the best hitter in the world and I said I was the best pitcher? Yeah, I remember, Josh called back. Well, now we're going to see what's what, Satch said. With a ball in hand and a grin on his face, Satch told Josh, I'm going to throw a fastball, let her high. Strike 1! Josh shook his head, tightened his grip on his bat, and resumed his position as he tried to stare into Satchel's eyes. But Satch stared straight ahead as Josh sneezed. His coach back at Mount Max School had always told him, "Look at the knees, Satch. Every weakness a batter has, you can spot in the knees. Now I'm going to throw this one a little faster and belt high," Satch said during the windup. "Strike two!" In typical Satch style, he called in a mocking voice. "Now I got you 0-2. I'm supposed to knock you down, but instead I'm going to throw a P at your knee." "Strike three!" Josh never moved the bat. Satch slowly inhaled the breath he'd been holding since the windup. It was over. He'd done what he'd come to do. "Nobody hit Satchel's fastball," he said through a smile as bright as the sun, "and nobody ever will." The end.